Good evening, wanderers of the night. Welcome to the shadow behind you, where the veil between the living and the forsaken grows thin, and the echoes of forgotten sins claw their way back into the light. I am your guide through these shadowed corridors of history, where bloodlines twist like gnarled roots beneath the earth, and the air itself carries the weight of unspoken horrors. Tonight, we delve into a tale buried deep in the crags and hollows of the Ozark Mountains, a story from 1862 when the world was aflame with civil strife, and humanity's darkest appetite stirred in the isolation of the wild. Imagine, if you will, the Ozarks in the grip of autumn's decay. The leaves turn blood red and gold, carpeting the forest floor like a shroud over fresh graves. Mist clings to the valleys like the breath of the damned, and the wind whispers through the pines, carrying secrets that no soul should hear. This is no idyllic wilderness, it's a labyrinth of limestone caves, jagged ridges, and hidden glens where the sun struggles to pierce the canopy. The ground underfoot is uneven, riddled with sinkholes that swallow the unwary, and the air is thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying foliage. In the distance, a crow's caw echoes like a mocking laugh, and the rustle of leaves might be footsteps, or something more sinister slinking through the underbrush. Here, in this forsaken corner of Missouri, families clung to the land like ticks to flesh, eking out a meager existence from rocky soil that yielded little but hardship and heartache. Farms were sparse, cabins rudimentary, built from felled timber and chinked with whatever mud or moss was at hand. Water came from springs that bubbled cold and clear, but sometimes carried a metallic tang from the lead veins beneath the hills. Life was a constant battle against nature, floods in spring, droughts in summer, blizzards in winter, and always the threat of wild animals. Bears, wolves, panthers, that lurked just beyond the firelight. But in 1862, as the American Civil War tore through the nation, the Ozarks became a cauldron of chaos far deadlier than any beast. Missouri, a border state, was fractured by divided loyalties. Unionists in the north, secessionists in the south, and everyone caught in the crossfire. Armies marched through, leaving trails of destruction. But it was the shadows between them that bred true terror. Guerrilla bands, bushwhackers and jayhawkers, roamed the hills, ambushing patrols, burning farms, and settling old scores with brutal efficiency. Deserters, refugees, and wandering strangers flooded the trails, seeking safety that often proved illusory. Many vanished without a trace, their fates attributed to the war's savagery. But some disappearances whispered of darker forces at play. Our story centers on one such shadow, the Holloway family, a clan whose name evokes shudders in faded diaries, around dying campfires, and in the quiet hours when sleep evades the mind. They were not the stuff of grand battles or heroic stands. No, theirs was a legacy of quiet predation, a hunger that turned the lost and the lonely into sustenance for the surviving. The Holloways, patriarch Elias, his iron-willed wife Miriam, and their brood of hollow-eyed children, dwelt in a remote cabin nestled in Black Hollow, a forsaken cleft in the mountains near what is now the Mark Twain National Forest. This hollow was a place of perpetual twilight, where the sun's rays filtered through a dense canopy of oak and hickory, casting dappled patterns that danced like phantoms on the forest floor. Legends speak of families like theirs, reclusive, intermarried to preserve bloodlines untainted by outsiders, bound by secrets darker than the caves they mined for lead and zinc. These clans were often viewed with suspicion by valley folk, whispers of witchcraft, of pacts with the devil, of unnatural appetites passed down through generations. But what set the Holloways apart was their sin, a cannibalistic rite born perhaps of desperation in a time of famine, or maybe something older, more primal, woven into the very fabric of Ozark folklore. Tales of witches who could shape-shift into animals, of spirits that feasted on human flesh, of cursed bloodlines that demanded tribute. These were the bedtime stories that chilled the bones of mountain children. Picture this, dear listener, a weary traveler, perhaps a Union soldier fleeing the carnage of the Battle of Pea Ridge, stumbles upon a flickering light in the gathering gloom. His boots are worn thin, his uniform ragged, his belly empty from days of foraging berries and roots. The air grows thick with the scent of wood smoke and something sweeter, more metallic, like blood mingled with the aroma of stewing herbs and wild onions. He approaches the cabin cautiously, hand on his pistol, but hope overrides fear. The door creaks open, revealing faces pale in the lamplight, eyes that gleam with an unnatural hunger, smiles that don't quite reach those eyes. The Holloways welcomed such strangers with open arms, offering food from their pot, rest by their hearth. A bowl of stew, thick and hearty, laced with herbs that soothed the body and clouded the mind. Conversation flowed like the nearby creek, tales of the war, of lost kin, of the hardships that bound all men. But as the night deepened, as the fire died to embers, the guest would feel a heaviness in their limbs, a fog in their thoughts. By dawn, they would be gone, their essence absorbed into the family, their bones joining the silent pile in the family's hidden well, a pit of horrors that locals later dubbed the Well of Bones, a bottomless maw where the earth itself seemed to hunger. Why do I tell you this now, in the quiet of your own surroundings? Because in these mountains, the past doesn't die, it festers, it waits, it watches. Reports from the era, buried in dusty archives and yellowed newspapers, speak of vanishing scouts sent on reconnaissance, peddlers with their wagons of wares, even entire patrols swallowed by the wilderness without a shot fired. Official records from Union commanders blame bushwhackers, those savage guerrilla fighters who roamed the Ozarks, ambushing supply lines and pillaging homesteads. But whispers among survivors, passed down through generations, hinted at something worse. Families turned feral, driven by starvation or madness, feeding on the war's detritus like vultures on a battlefield. The Holloways embodied this nightmare. Their tale, a macabre blend of documented fact and chilling folklore that still sends shivers down the spines of those who hike the Ozark trails today. As we unravel their story, layer by layer, feel the mist on your skin, hear the crunch of leaves underfoot, taste the metallic tang of fear in your mouth, and sense that prickling at the nape of your neck, the unmistakable feeling of the shadow behind you, drawing ever closer, its breath cold on your ear. Let us begin with the roots of this darkness, planted long before the first cannon fired at Fort Sumter. In the spring of 1862, as tensions boiled over into open warfare, the Ozarks were already a powder keg. The Battle of Pea Ridge in early March saw thousands clash in the rugged terrain, with Union forces claiming victory, but at great cost. The aftermath sent waves of the wounded and the weary into the hills, where law was as scarce as mercy. Families like the Holloways, neutral at first glance, found their farms raided, their livestock stolen, their young men pressed into service by one side or the other. Elias Holloway was a man forged in the fires of hardship. Born in 1810 to Irish immigrants who sought fortune in the lead mines, he lost his father to a cave-in at age 12, his mother to fever soon after. He married young, but his first wife perished in childbirth, leaving him with a bitterness that hardened his soul. Then came Miriam, a woman of mixed Cherokee and Scottish descent, versed in the herbal lore of her ancestors and the superstitions of the mountains. She brought with her knowledge of roots that could heal or harm, of spells whispered under the moon to ward off evil or invite it in. Together they raised 5 children, the eldest, Jedidiah, strong but silent, with hands calloused from plough and axe, the twins Abigail and Amos, with eyes like polished obsidian that seemed to see into one's very thoughts. Young Sarah, ethereal and watchful, often found talking to shadows, and the babe, little Ezekiel, whose cries echoed through the hollow like omens of doom. The family was self-sufficient, hunting deer and turkey, growing corn and potatoes in rocky patches, but the war disrupted everything. Trade routes closed, armies scorched earth, and famine stalked the land like a spectre. Stories from the time tell of starvation driving men to madness, echoes of the Donner Party out west in 1846, where snowbound pioneers turned to unspeakable acts to survive. In the Ozarks, isolation amplified this desperation. Folklore abounds with tales of cannibal witches, beings who lured the unwary with illusions of plenty, only to devour their flesh and soul. Was Miriam such a witch, her Cherokee heritage twisting into something dark? Or did necessity birth their curse, the war's cruelty stripping away civilization's veneer? As refugees flooded the trails, deserters from battles like Newtonia in September, where Confederates and Unionists clashed in bloody melee, the Holloways saw not threats, but opportunity in the lost. Their cabin became a beacon in the night, a trap baited with hospitality. Our hook into this abyss lies with one such wanderer, a Confederate scout named Harlan Crow, who escaped their clutches in the dead of night, his journal later found clutched in his cold hands by a Union patrol. In it, he scrawled frantic entries. They are not human. They feast on the flesh of the fallen, and their children smile with teeth stained red. God forgive me for what I witnessed. Crow's words survived, buried in a Union archive in St. Louis, a testament to the horror that lurked in Black Hollow. But was it real, or the ravings of a man broken by war and wound? Tonight, we exhume the truth, sifting through the soil of history and legend, until the chill seeps into your bones and the darkness feels alive. As the fire crackles low and the night deepens, lean in closer. The shadow behind you stirs, and the tale of the Holloways unfolds. What drove a family to such abomination? Survival in a world gone mad, madness inherited from the land itself, or a darker inheritance, a curse that binds blood to bone. Stay with me, dear listener, for in these mountains the hungry never truly rest. They wait, they watch, and they whisper your name in the wind. Now, let us descend into the heart of the story, where the mist-shrouded paths of the Ozarks lead us inexorably to Black Hollow. It was early March 1862, just days before the thunderous clash at Pea Ridge that would scar the land and send shockwaves through the region. The air hung heavy with the promise of rain, the kind that turns dirt trails into sucking mud and isolates the already remote homesteads, cutting them off from the world like islands in a sea of green. The sky was a low, brooding grey, and the wind carried the distant rumble of thunder, as if the heavens themselves were warning of the horrors to come. Elias Holloway stood at the edge of his clearing, axe in hand, his breath fogging in the chill dawn light. His frame was gaunt, muscles corded like twisted vines from years of resting a living from the unforgiving rock. Scars crisscrossed his arms, reminders of the lead mines that had claimed his youth, his brothers, and nearly his own life in a collapse that left him trapped for days in the dark. His face was weathered, lines etched deep by sun and sorrow, his beard a tangled mess of grey and black. He swung the axe with mechanical precision, the blade biting into a sapling with a thud that echoed through the hollow. The cabin behind him squatted low against the hillside, built of rough, hewn logs chinked with moss and clay to keep out the wind. Its roof was thatched with shingles split from oak, and a stone chimney belched smoke that smelled of pine and something earthier, like rotting leaves mixed with the faint odor of cooked meat. Inside, the single room was dim, lit by a hearth fire and a few tallow candles that cast flickering shadows on the walls. Miriam moved within, her shadow dancing against the oiled paper windows like a spectre. She was a woman of the mountains, her dark hair braided with feathers and dried herbs, her skin tanned by sun and wind, her eyes holding the secrets of the old ways, knowledge passed down from her Cherokee grandmother, who had survived the Trail of Tears only to settle in these hills. The children clustered around her, each a reflection of the family's isolation. Jedidiah at 16 was broad-shouldered and tall, his hands already calloused from work, his expression stoic as he sharpened a knife with rhythmic scrapes that filled the air with a metallic whisper. The twins, Abigail and Amos, 12 years old, sat cross-legged on the dirt floor, whispering in a language half English, half forgotten Cherokee incantations, their identical faces pale and their eyes like polished obsidian, reflecting the firelight in a way that seemed almost predatory. Young Sarah, 8, clutched a rag doll stained with berry juice, her blonde hair matted and her gaze distant, as if she saw things others could not. And the babe, Ezekiel, barely 2, gurgled in a cradle carved from a hollowed stump, his tiny fists waving as if warding off invisible threats. Life had been hard before the war, a daily grind of planting, hunting, and surviving the elements. But now it was a blade pressed to the throat, sharp and unrelenting. Union patrols from Springfield had swept through in February, requisitioning their meager stores. Sacks of corn, a few hogs, even the last milking goat that provided milk for the children. For the cause, the blue-coated officer had said, his voice clipped and indifferent, his men loading the goods onto wagons without a backward glance. Elias had nodded, hiding the rage boiling in his gut, his fists clenched until his nails bit into palms. The Confederates were no better, bushwhackers. Those ragged bands of rebels, led by men like Quantrill, had stolen tools and threatened worse if he didn't swear loyalty to the South. Neutrality was a myth in these hills, everyone paid in blood or bread, and the Holloways had little of either left. That morning, as Elias felled the sapling for firewood, splitting it with precise strikes that sent chips flying like snow, he heard it, the distant crack of branches underfoot, the labored breath of a man approaching through the underbrush. His axe paused mid-swing, his ears straining. From the thicket emerged a stranger, tall, disheveled, in a tattered grey uniform that marked him as Confederate. His name was Corporal Silas Thorne, a deserter from Van Dorn's army, fleeing the build-up to Pea Ridge after seeing too many friends cut down in drills and skirmishes. Thorne's eyes were wild with exhaustion, his boots caked in mud, a musket slung over his shoulder but no powder horn in sight, his ammunition long expended. "Water," he croaked, collapsing against a tree trunk, his voice hoarse from thirst and fear. For God's sake, water and a moment's rest. Elias regarded him like a hunter sizing up prey, his gaze steady and unblinking, calculating the man's strength, his weapons, his desperation. Strangers were rare in Black Hollow, but the war had turned the trails into rivers of the displaced. Men running from conscription, women fleeing burned homes, children orphaned by battle. "Come," Elias said finally, his voice gravelly from years of mind, dust and silence, extending a scarred hand. Thorne hesitated, sensing something off in the man's demeanor. The way his eyes didn't warm with the offer, the slight curl of his lip, but thirst won out over instinct, and he followed Elias to the cabin. Inside, the air was warm and thick with the scent of herbs drying from the rafters. Sage, thyme, and something bitter like nightshade. Miriam set a tin cup before him, filled with cool spring water laced with her special blend valerian to calm the nerves, and a touch of belladonna to dull the senses, what she called her mountain tea, for weary travelers. The children watched silently from the corners, their faces pale masks in the firelight, their stares intense and unchildlike. Thorne drank greedily, the liquid soothing his parched throat, and as the potion took hold, he began to spin his tale. The horrors of camp life with disease rampant, the looming battle where thousands would die, comrades felled by dysentery or enemy fire. "The Ozarks swallow men whole," he muttered, his eyelids drooping as the herbs wove their spell. "Spits out their bones for the crows." Elias nodded sympathetically, asking questions that drew out more details, but his mind raced with darker thoughts. The family's larder was empty, winter's stores depleted by raiders and poor harvests. Miriam had spoken often of the old stories from her grandmother. Tales of spirits that fed on the weak during times of famine, of ancestors who survived by taking what the land provided, no matter the form. "The land provides," she whispered to Elias later that night, as Thorne slumbered deeply by the hearth, his breathing slow and even. "But we must take what it sends, or we perish like the others." By midnight, under a moon obscured by clouds, the deed was done. Jedidiah held the man down with his youthful strength unyielding, his knee pressed into Thorne's back as the soldier stirred from his drugged sleep. Elias wielded the axe with practiced swing, the blade gleaming in the moonlight before it fell, the thunk of impact followed by a gurgle and silence. The cabin filled with the coppery tang of blood, warm and sticky on the floor, the children's eyes wide not with horror, but with a curious hunger, as if this was a lesson in survival. Miriam butchered the body with efficiency born of necessity, salting portions for the smokehouse hidden in the woods, boiling bones for a nutrient, rich broth that would sustain them through the coming days. "Wast not?" She intoned like a prayer to the shadows, her knife flashing as she worked, the fire crackling as fat dripped into the flames. Thorn's remains vanished into the well, a deep sinkhole behind the cabin, its waters black and still, the sides slick with moss and echoing with the drip of underground springs. It was a natural grave, bottomless, they said, where the earth accepted offerings without judgment. This was not their first such act. Months earlier, in the depths of winter, a peddler had wandered in, his wagon laden with trinkets and cloth. He left without it, his flesh sustaining the family through a bitter freeze that killed livestock and froze the ground hard as iron. The war masked their sins perfectly. Disappearances were blamed on guerrillas like Quatral's raiders, who burned farms and hanged suspected informers, their atrocities covering a multitude of darker deeds. But the Holloways grew bolder as spring thawed the ground and life returned to the hills. In April, after Pea Ridge's Union victory drove Confederates south into Arkansas, a wave of refugees trickled north, seeking safety in Union-held territories. One was a young woman, Eliza Grant, fleeing with her infant from the ruins of her Arkansas farm, her husband killed in the battle. She knocked at the cabin door at dusk, rain plastering her shawl to her skin, the babe crying in her arms. Miriam welcomed her with a warmth that seemed genuine, cooing over the infant and offering dry clothes and a seat by the fire. "Rest here, child," she said, her voice soft as she stirred the pot, offering stew that steamed invitingly with chunks of meat and vegetables. Eliza ate gratefully, unaware of the watchful eyes of the children who circled like curious wolves. That night, as thunder rolled across the ridges and lightning illuminated the hollow in stark flashes, the family struck. Eliza's screams echoed briefly, silenced by Jedidiah's rough hand over her mouth, the struggle short and desperate. The infant, too small, too innocent, was spared the knife for now, but Miriam claimed it as her own, renaming it and weaving it into their brood with a possessiveness that brooked no argument. "The land gives back," she murmured, cradling the child to her breast, its cries mingling with the storm. Tension built as spring gave way to summer, the days lengthening, but the family's secret weighing heavier. Elias began to dream of bones rising from the well, skeletal fingers pointing accusatory at him in the night. The children changed subtly. Abigail and Amos developed a game they called hunting strangers, mimicking lures with eerie accuracy, their laughter high and chilling as they practiced in the woods. Sarah whispered to her doll of red feasts and hungry nights, her imagination twisted by reality. Even Ezekiel's babble seemed laced with malice, his tiny teeth bared in grins that unnerved. Word spread in whispers among neighboring farms, miles away but connected by winding trails and shared markets. A miller named Cobb mentioned missing kin who had set out for Black Hollow. A preacher in a nearby settlement spoke of demonic possession in the remote hollows, his sermons warning of Satan's influence in times of war. The Holloways kept to themselves, but suspicion is a seed that grows in fertile soil. Then came Harlan Crow, the Confederate scout whose journal would eventually damn them to infamy. In June, amid escalating guerrilla skirmishes that saw farms torched and men hanged from trees, Crow arrived at the cabin wounded, a mini ball lodged in his thigh from a bushwhacker ambush. The Holloways nursed him with apparent kindness, Miriam's herbs easing his pain but also keeping him weak. But Crow, a man sharpened by reconnaissance, sensed the wrongness, the off, putting sweetness in the air from the smokehouse. The children's too, sharp smiles that revealed teeth stained faintly pink. One night, feigning sleep as the family thought him unconscious, he witnessed the ritual through slitted eyes. The family gathered around a steaming pot, chanting softly in Miriam's tongue as they partook of the stew, their faces illuminated by the fire in grotesque masks of satisfaction. Horror propelled him to flee, limping into the woods under cover of darkness, his writings a frantic scrawl on scraps of paper as he collapsed miles away, his body found by a Union patrol. As summer waned and the heat baked the earth, the Holloway's isolation began to crack. Union patrols, hunting bushwhackers who had struck at supply lines, camped nearby in the ridges. One soldier, Sergeant Hale, vanished while on watch. His comrades waking to find his post empty, his rifle gone. Searchers turned up only a bloodied boot, half buried in leaves. Suspicion fell on local clans, but the Holloways played the part of innocent mountaineers, offering aid and information to deflect attention. Yet eyes turned toward Black Hollow, where lights flickered unnaturally late into the night, and strange smells wafted on the wind. The stage was set for the deepening darkness, as the family's appetite grew with each success, their humanity eroding like the limestone caves beneath their feet. The summer of 1862 deepened the shadows in Black Hollow, turning the Ozarks into a furnace of fear and fire, where the sun beat down mercilessly on the parched earth, and the nights brought no relief, only the hum of insects and the distant howls of wolves. Guerrilla warfare raged unchecked across the region. Bushwhackers like Bloody Bill Anderson and his band struck from the underbrush with savage precision, leaving trails of smoke from burned barns and the bodies of the unlucky swinging from trees as warnings. The air smelled of gunpowder and char, and the trails were littered with the remnants of conflict. Discarded uniforms, broken wagons, and the occasional unburied corpse pecked at by crows. The Holloways, emboldened by their string of successful hunts and the war's chaos that provided perfect cover, expanded their methods. Elias and Jedidiah set traps along forgotten paths that wound through the hollow, pits dug deep and lined with sharpened stakes, snares baited with false campfires that flickered invitingly in the dusk to draw in the weary. Miriam's herbs became more sophisticated, her potions ensuring compliance without immediate suspicion, a dash of opium poppy for euphoria mixed with the dulling nightshade. The children participated more actively, their innocence a perfect lure, their small voices calling out to strangers with pleas for help or offers of guidance. In July, a band of 3 deserters, Union men evading conscription after the draft riots in St. Louis, stumbled into one such web, led by Private Larkin. A burly Irishman with a thick accent and a haunted look, they sought refuge from jayhawkers prowling the ridges, their uniforms discarded for civilian rags. The Holloways feigned hospitality, inviting them to share a meal around the hearth, trading tales of neutrality amid the chaos. "The war eats us all, brother," Elias said, his eyes glinting in the firelight as he passed around a jug of moonshine laced with Miriam's blend. The men relaxed, laughing at old stories, unaware of the children's watchful gazes from the shadows. That night, as the men slept in the barn on hay bales, the family descended like a pack of wolves on a lame deer. Larkin woke to the weight of Jedidiah on his chest, a knife at his throat, his struggle fierce but futile as Elias and the twins joined in, the barn's hay soaked red with blood, the air thick with guttural cries and the metallic scent of death. Amos, small but ferocious, wielded a hatchet with chilling precision, his face splattered but expressionless. The bodies were processed quickly, portions smoked for later, bones boiled, and remnants consigned to the well, which now seemed to emit a low hum on quiet nights, as if the dead murmured below. But this feast brought unforeseen peril. One deserter, the youngest named Riley, was only mortally wounded in the melee and managed to crawl away into the woods, his trail of blood leading him to a neighboring farmstead miles away. Collapsing on the porch of old man Cobb the miller, he gasped out his last words, "Demons in human skin, in Black Hollow, they eat before expiring Cobb." A grizzled veteran of earlier Indian wars spread the tale at the next market day, his voice trembling as he described Riley's wounds and ravings. Word reached Captain Elias Barstow at Clark's Mill, a Union outpost fortified against guerrilla attacks. Barstow, hardened by raids like the one on November 7 later that year where Confederates overran the mill, dispatched scouts to investigate, their reports noting unusual activity in the hollow. The Holloways sensed the noose tightening. Miriam consulted bones tossed into the fire, reading omens in their cracks, patterns of blood and betrayal that made her face pale. She brewed stronger wards, hanging bundles of herbs at the doors, but the family's unity began to fracture under the strain. Elias grew paranoid, snapping at the children for minor infractions, his dreams plagued by visions of the well overflowing with vengeful spirits. August brought a heat wave that parched the streams and withered the crops, mirroring the family's growing thirst for both water and prey. They claimed a peddler family, husband, wife, and 2 young children, wandering north from the aftermath of battles in Cane Hill, Arkansas. The group arrived exhausted, the father's wagon wheel broken, seeking aid. Miriam tended to them with her usual charm, the children playing with the visitors' offspring to lower guards. The screams that night haunted even Elias, the high-pitched wails of the little ones mingling with the parents' pleas for mercy. Sarah, usually quiet, hesitated for the first time, her knife trembling, earning a sharp rebuke from Miriam. The feast was plentiful, but the act left a sour taste, the family eating in silence as thunderheads gathered. Haunting events multiplied as the season turned. Nights brought apparitions, whispers from the well that sounded like names of the dead, spectral figures in the mist resembling past victims, their eyes accusatory. Abigail claimed to see Corporal Thorne's ghost standing at the tree line, his hand outstretched, as if beckoning her to join him. The family turned inward, paranoia festering like a wound. Miriam accused Sarah of weakness, forcing the girl to participate more fully to harden her spirit. Ezekiel, the adopted babe now thriving on the family's dark sustenance, cried incessantly at night, as if sensing the taint in the air, his wails echoing like a siren's call. Conflict peaked in September, during the Battle of Newtonia, where Confederate forces under Shelby clashed with Union troops in a bloody engagement that sent shockwaves through the Ozarks. The fighting drove stragglers into the hills, one of whom was Lieutenant Vaughn, a Southern officer, carrying maps of hidden supply caches. He arrived at the cabin at dusk, his horse lame from a thrown shoe, his uniform stained with sweat and blood from a minor wound. Suspicion etched his face, but hunger drew him in. Miriam's tea failed to fully subdue him. Vaughn resisted the drowsiness, drawing his saber when he overheard a whispered conversation about fresh meat. A fierce fight ensued in the cabin. Tables overturned, lamps shattered, the air filled with grunts and clashes of steel. Elias was felled temporarily, his arm gashed deep, blood flowing freely. Jedidiah pinned Vaughn against the wall, the officer's strength waning as the children swarmed like insects. As they prepared the rite, binding him with ropes, Vaughn's words pierced the frenzy. "You're no better than the savages they say haunt these woods." Cursed, "All of you." His flesh sustained them through the autumn, but his maps revealed tempting supply lines, leading Elias to consider raiding beyond their hollow for the first time, a risky escalation. As October's chill descended, bringing frost to the leaves and a bite to the wind, the family's doom approached. A guerrilla band, mistaking the Holloways for Union sympathizers due to a misplaced flag seen by scouts, attacked the cabin under cover of night. Gunfire shattered the peace, bullets punching through logs as the family scrambled for weapons. Amos fell in the initial volley, gut shot and screaming as he clutched his belly, blood bubbling between fingers. In a rage born of loss, the Holloways turned the tables, using their knowledge of the terrain to lure the attackers inside one by one. The feast that followed was frenzied, the family devouring with a savagery that shocked even them, blood painting the walls like macabre art. But several guerrillas escaped, wounded but alive, spreading tales of the Cannibal clan in Black Hollow to their comrades. Union forces, under increasing pressure from the string of vanishings and now with corroborating stories, planned a raid. In November, as leaves fell like confetti from dying trees, a squad led by Sergeant Hale's Avenger, his brother, driven by grief, descended on the hollow. They found the cabin ablaze, set by Elias in a desperate bid to destroy evidence as the family fled into the network of caves that honeycombed the hills. Searches uncovered horrors: the well, choked with bones of dozens, skulls cracked, femurs gnawed, ribs scattered like discarded kindling. Harlan Crow's journal, hidden nearby in a hollow tree where he had stashed it before dying, detailed the atrocities in vivid, horrifying detail, its pages stained with blood and mud. Yet the Holloways evaded capture, melting into the wilderness like smoke, their fate unknown. Some say they perished in the caves, starved or crushed in collapses. Others whisper of sightings, shadowy figures in the woods, luring unwary hikers even in modern times. The well, sealed by authorities, still echoes with faint cries on moonless nights, a testament to the unresting dead. The tale of the Holloways ends not with resolution, but with lingering dread, a reminder that in the Ozarks, evil doesn't die, it hides, waiting for the next wanderer to stray too close. To fully grasp the chilling descent of the Holloway family into abomination, we must exhume the bones of the era, delving into the historical and cultural soil that nourished such horrors. The year 1862 marked a pivotal moment in the American Civil War, particularly in the border state of Missouri, where the Ozarks served as a rugged backdrop for some of the conflict's most brutal and unconventional warfare. This region, characterized by its karst topography, limestone riddled with caves, sinkholes, and springs, was a place where nature itself seemed complicit in hiding secrets, its isolation fostering communities that were self-reliant to the point of insularity. Missouri's status as a slave state that remained in the Union created deep fractures. Loyalties were divided. Urban areas like St. Louis leaned Union, while rural southern counties, including the Ozarks, harbored strong Confederate sympathies. The war here was not one of grand armies clashing on open fields, but of guerrilla tactics, where small bands struck from hiding, making every trail a potential ambush site. Key to our tale is the Battle of Pea Ridge, fought March 6-8, 1862, in northwest Arkansas but spilling over into Missouri. Union forces under General Samuel Curtis repelled Confederate Major General Earl Van Dorn's army at Elkhorn Tavern, securing Missouri for the North and preventing a Confederate invasion. The battle's cost was high, over 3,000 casualties, and its aftermath sent waves of deserters, wounded, and refugees into the Ozark Hills, where they became easy prey for opportunists. Victory at Pea Ridge bred chaos rather than peace. With regular armies moving elsewhere, the vacuum filled with irregulars, bushwhackers, pro-Confederate guerrillas like William Quantrill and Bloody Bill Anderson, infamous for their raids, and Jayhawkers, pro-Union counterparts who retaliated with equal viciousness. No quarter was given. Atrocities included scalping, hanging, and farm burnings. In Ozark County and surrounding areas, events like the Battle of Clark's Mill on November 7, 1862, saw Confederate Colonel John Q. Burbridge overrun a Union post, capturing supplies amid a backdrop of famine and desperation. Resources were scarce. Armies and guerrillas alike requisitioned food, leaving civilians starving. Families turned to foraging, but poor harvests and disrupted trade routes led to widespread hunger. This starvation context is crucial, echoing historical precedents like the Donner Party in 1846-47, where California-bound pioneers resorted to cannibalism after being snowbound in the Sierra Nevada. In the Ozarks, similar desperation arose, amplified by isolation. Folklore played a significant role, blending European settler superstitions with Native American legends. The Cherokee, displaced to the region via the Trail of Tears in the 1830s, brought stories like that of Spearfinger, a witch, like being with a long finger that pierced livers, devouring them. These tales merged with Scottish and Irish folklore of cannibals and shape-shifters, creating Ozark myths of cannibal witches who lured victims with hospitality only to consume them. Real historical vanishings fueled these legends. The Black Hollow mystery parallels our tale. In the mid-1800s, a reclusive family in a similar hollow disappeared, with later excavations revealing bones in a well attributed to feuds, but whispered to be self-inflicted horror. In modern times, the Mark Twain National Forest, encompassing much of the Ozarks, harbors stories of cannibal cults. In places like Winderville, where urban legends speak of families surviving depressions by similar means. Lake of the Ozarks, created in the 1930s, is said to hide drowned bodies that never surface, adding to the eerie aura. Culturally, the Ozarks were a melting pot of isolationist clans, where intermarriage was common to preserve land and secrets, leading to genetic peculiarities and suspicions of inbreeding. Superstitions governed life omens, read in animal entrails, herbal remedies that bordered on magic, and beliefs in haints, ghosts that haunted hollows. The war's trauma exacerbated this. General Thomas Ewing's Order No. 11 in 1863 evacuated entire counties, displacing thousands and creating ghost towns ripe for dark deeds. Blending fact and folklore, the Holloway's story gains unsettling authenticity. Documented disappearances in 1862 reports from Union archives list dozens missing in the Ozarks, blamed on guerrillas but with notes of unnatural circumstances. Local legends, collected in books like Vance Randolph's Ozark Magic and Folklore, 1947, include tales of families turning cannibal during hard times, their spirits still wandering. This fusion creates a sense that the Holloways weren't anomalies, but products of a land and time where survival demanded the unspeakable, leaving a legacy that haunts the hills to this day. Peeling back the layers of the Holloway tale reveals not just a story of horror, but a profound exploration of symbolic, psychological, and cultural depths that resonate with universal human fears. At its core, the family's cannibalism symbolizes the all-consuming nature of war itself, a conflict that devoured lives, ideals, and morality. The Holloways become metaphors for how societal strife erodes humanity, turning neighbors into predators and survival into savagery. Their feasts represent the literal and figurative consumption of the other, strangers as resources in a zero-sum game, echoing themes in literature like Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness, where isolation breeds barbarism. Psychologically, the story delves into trauma-induced depravity. The war's constant threat, raids, famine, loss, mirrors post-traumatic stress, where repeated exposure to violence desensitizes and warps. Elias's scarred past from mining accidents, Miriam's cultural displacement, the children's exposure to death, all contribute to a family psychosis, a shared delusion where cannibalism becomes normalized as the land providing. This connects to real studies on famine psychology, like the Minnesota Starvation Experiment 1944-45, showing how hunger alters ethics, leading to obsessive food thoughts and moral compromise. Thematically, it ties to universal fears, the stranger as threat, or inversely, the danger in trusting hospitality. In folklore, this is the Hansel and Gretel motif, the witch's house luring the lost. In the Ozarks, it reflects xenophobia in isolated communities, where outsiders brought disease or conflict. Culturally, it links to American trauma, the Civil War's fratricide leaving scars in border states, with guerrilla warfare's legacy of mistrust persisting in modern divisions. Human nature's dark side is laid bare, the thin veneer of civilization, stripped by necessity. Are we all Holloways, waiting for crisis to unmask our primal instincts? The well symbolizes the subconscious, a pit of repressed horrors that bubble up. Intellectually, it critiques survival ethics, utilitarianism gone mad, where ends justify means. Ominously, the tale warns that such darkness endures, haunting through folklore, reminding us that in shadows, our own hunger watches. As our journey through the shadowed paths of Black Hollow draws to a close, the mist of the Ozarks lingers in the mind, thick and cloying, whispering of the Holloway family's unquiet legacy. We have traversed the depths of their descent. From desperate survivors to predators cloaked in hospitality, their sins masked by the war's greater atrocities, Elias, Miriam, and their brood stand as eternal sentinels of the horrors that isolation and conflict can unleash. Their story a cautionary echo that reverberates through time. But does it truly end? Legends persist of the Holloways wandering the hills, their form spectral, luring modern hikers with flickering lights or the scent of cooking fires. The Well of Bones, though sealed, is said to weep on stormy nights, its waters rising with the cries of the devout. Did they perish in those labyrinthine caves, their bodies claimed by the earth they so revered? Or do they endure, a cursed bloodline adapted to the shadows, waiting for the next wanderer to stray? Dear listener, as the fire dies and the night envelops you, ponder this. In every hollow of the human soul lies a potential black hollow where hunger, be it for food, power, or revenge, can awaken the beast within. Feel the chill, hear the whisper, sense the shadow behind you growing longer. It draws near, its breath a sigh of invitation. Sleep if you can, but remember the hungry never rest. They wait, they watch, and one day they may call your name.